What I think I'll start with is when you've looked at your involvement in customized learning
Mhm.
from the beginning to now, since you're one of the first schools that joined the grant, what's been the greatest highlights and what have been the biggest struggles?
Well, I think I'm going to start with the struggle because I think when I was first introduced to mass customized learning, it just seemed like a very huge challenge that I had a hard time wrapping my mind around, just as to how we were going to get to the end of it. And the more I've kind of struggled through it, the highlights would be is a lot of customized learning is things that as a teacher, like I've done. A lot of things that a lot of teachers have done because we've known, differentiated instruction and giving students as much choice to make the learning meaningful for them. So it's an idea or a concept that we're very well aware of, I think, as teachers. But I think we are just becoming more conscious of how we can even push the boundaries of it further and really be just cognizant of how we can reach all kids with a lot of the philosophy behind customized learning. So I guess the highlight for me is it's not really a totally new concept. We had a lot of the components, it's just now we're trying to bring it all together and maybe push the barrier of what we've done before.
So when you look at the barriers, what is it that gets in the way right now, which would really be a true customized environment for you?
I think a lot of what gets in my way is we still have state requirements, and especially for our district where the junior high is the only building so far that's really gone forward with customized learning, is we still have other areas that we need to answer to. I know the 8th graders, they're gonna go be freshmen at the high school and who may or may not at that time have adopted customized learning. There's still things, there's standards through the state that we're required to meet. There's grading as a district. And so when you try and fully customize, I think some of those walls have to come down in order to best meet student needs. I feel like grading's a really big one for me.
So with the students themselves, in what ways are you seeing customized affecting their everyday life as a student?
Well, I think as students, we've really challenged students this year because, since they were in kindergarten or preschool, they've gone to school, pretty much one way, and they've, been exposed to choices and, differentiated instruction, but never probably at the quantity that they are now. And so I think anytime that for adults, coming out of our comfort zone when we choose to is hard. These kids, essentially, we kind of shoved them out of their comfort zone, and I think that's been a lot for students to take on. Some of them have done really well, and when you really step back and explain to them that it's nothing really that different, that it's just a different approach, but the content is still essentially kind of the same, they start to grasp it a little bit more. But really having the kids take on that ownership and having that motivation of pushing themselves to the limit and not just saying, well, what do I have to do? What do I have to do to pass? Or, is pushing them kind of past those boundaries and really take ownership of their own learning.
So are there kids that this doesn't work well with?
There's kids that struggle with it probably more so than others. There's kids that I still give a lot of explicit instruction to, and I kind of still break it down into steps for them. But even if, maybe the freedom doesn't work for them, there's other components of customized learning that does. I haven't met a kid yet that when I say, this is what I need you to show me, how do you want to do that? That doesn't like having the choice of, are you going to make a storyboard? Are you going to write a paper? Are you just going to come have a conversation with me? I think that part fits for most kids. If the choices become too overwhelming, it's pretty easy to say, okay, look, you could do 1, 2, or 3 different options. There are kids that still need that constant deadline, as far as the pacing, so they don't get too far behind. But I think there's components in customized learning that fit each student.
Now, do you primarily still have students all kind of working at the same content at the same time, or do you have sometimes where you can flexibly group kids and they can work at different paces?
Well, we all start at the same point. They're all in the same unit. So right now we're really talking a lot about our government. And all the kids are in that same unit. Now, as kids finish a paper or finish a project, I might just have them move on to the next thing, but they're no more within a week apart from each other. And a lot of that's just because I'm still trying to get the depth of the curriculum needed to let those students just go.
Yep.
Because some of them could just go, and it'd be awesome to see. So that's my hope for it. We're just not quite there yet.
So what is kind of your next goal in the design of a customized environment? What are you going to be working on next?
I think I'd really like to work on the pace. I think I have down with the choices. What works well in my class, I keep it pretty open-ended, and we just really go off the learning targets and how they want to show mastery is really their choice. So I think I'd really like to work on pace, and I'd really like to, especially with history, it's really easy just to go in a chronological order. And I'm almost to the point I want to get away from that and be like, okay, here are different areas throughout our country, because some kids are really interested in World War II while others would be interested in the Civil War, and give them the freedom to go explore those different areas and focus more like on the standards of like reading and writing in history, build my learning targets off of that, but let them have the choice of the content.
Yeah, I think especially in social studies, we owe that perception that it's learning about time periods when really it's more about learning about the concepts, and the time period is interchangeable almost.
Right. And that's one of those things, though, it goes back to those weight-bearing walls. You know, the standards still kind of tell you which time periods to teach, but I feel like if you were to really, you know, look at the power standards, which we've talked about, and prioritizing the standards, you know, if my kids leave with the skills necessary, I know they can find the material. If they know what to do with it, then I'd be very happy.
We talked a little bit about growth mindset and fixed mindset at the beginning of the year. Can you give us examples of where you've seen kids kind of make a switch, or that help them embrace a customized environment?
Absolutely. We also do the ICU program. And so I have some 8th graders who last year it was a battle. I mean, we're talking every week there was probably about 10 assignments on their list, and there wasn't a lot of motivation to get past that. And it's been interesting because some of those students, I can think of 2 right off the top of my head, have done really well. Not saying that they never have missing work, but they're a lot more motivated to stay on top of it because there is the flexibility there. And I think it's not quite so much pressure as the traditional, like you've got 3 things due on Tuesday, you've got 5 things due on Thursday. They've kind of taken that flexibility and the little bit more laid back atmosphere, and it's really worked for them. So I think they're seeing themselves as more successful because, you know, we've had conversations, look at last year how it was, and look at how far you've come this year. So that's been really cool to see.
So how does that work? I know people that have misperceptions that there are no deadlines, kids only work when they feel like it, but where do deadlines come into play in your environment, and how is it flexible but yet not too flexible?
Right, that's been kind of a struggle because I found most students still need deadlines to an extent. And I do require kids, you know, I tell them when they come to my class, I want them to work. So if it's a day where they just don't feel like working on history, you know, if they're pretty well caught up in my class, but they have an English assignment due, I'm like, that's fine. As long as that student and I have a conversation about what they're going to need to get done, it's okay with me. Now, if they're really far behind in my class, then I tell them, you know, we should probably get on track here with history. The deadlines, I try to be flexible. I say, you know, on Thursday, we're moving on to the next thing. If you're not quite done with it, you know, you have until this day to get it to me before I'm going to worry about putting it on your list. And I'll usually give them about 3 to 4 days grace period. I don't like to go much further than that because if it builds up and their list ends up really long, it's really hard to get that back and get caught up, and that causes a lot of stress for them.
Now, some people would think that by having flexible deadlines, you're not really preparing them for the real world, or you're not teaching them how to make a deadline. But what's your response to that? I mean,
You know, just from my, you know, I try to hit deadlines, but I also know, you know, as working as a teacher, all the principals I've worked for, you know, there's some flexibility. I mean, you'd like to say that you have absolutely everything done on the day that they want it done and turned in, but it doesn't always happen. And so I figure if, you know, an employer is willing to show that mercy, you know, these kids have lives outside of school and a lot they're dealing with too. And if I know, you know, I'm not going to get to this until a week, they don't need to have it into me, you know, prior to that. So I'm okay with it, you know, and I tell them there's some things like you gotta have in, like no questions asked. If they're gonna have to have it in order to move on at all, to understand, then the deadline's a little stricter. But if it's a project, some kids, they all work at different paces. And I'd rather have their best work than, you know, just something that they did really fast and felt like they didn't have the time to do it correctly.
Sure. Tell me about teaching to mastery as opposed to teaching to percentages. You started to make a transition at all, or do you still do a lot of percentage grading? How do you go after mastery as opposed to just percentages?
That's a tough one for me. Since we've started customized learning, I've thought a lot differently about my philosophy in grading, and I do not grade nearly as much as I used to. That's still kind of a touchy area because as a district, we're not all customized. And I still have to have grades, you know, at the end of the week to post and whatnot. So I've really told the kids, what I do is I've started using a lot more rubrics, and I've tried to make anything that I grade worth the same amount of points. So all of my assignments this quarter are within a 2-point, like one might be 5. There's nothing higher than 7. There's nothing lower than 3. So that way one assignment doesn't completely outweigh, you know, another one. And I really just try, and I tell them exactly how I'm going to grade them. So my hope is they still have a percentage grade because I don't have a way around that right now. But the grade hopefully reflects their ability a lot more than it has in the past.
So if you were able to eliminate the barrier of district requirements, what would you hope to be with mastery as opposed to the grading system?
You know, if I could eliminate grading, get rid of the infinite campus part of it, I think like for parents and for kids alone, like I would just list the standards, my priority standards that I wanted to accomplish. I have about 6 or 8 of them. And like I said, it'd probably be a lot of those skills, more the ones found in like history with writing and reading. And I would just do comments on, okay, this is what they can do with this so far. And I mean, eventually I'm sure I'd have to put a 1, 2, 3, or 4. But I still feel like that would tell parents a lot more than what our grading system does now. They use it a lot in preschool and kindergarten, and I absolutely loved it for my own student because I knew exactly what she knew when I looked at that progress report. And right now I don't feel like percentage grading, I mean, kids just more so care if they're at an A, a B, or a C, rather than what they actually know. So,
what about when you look at the kids you deal with? Are there certain kids that it's hard to challenge them or hard to get them off center, to get them moving forward, or do you find that most kids really are able to take some responsibility and move forward?
You know, the majority of our kids, if you meet them at their level, are willing to move forward. That's been something that I've really noticed and really struggled with even the first semester, and have really kind of taken a step back and really looked at, you know, what am I asking these kids to do as opposed to what, you know, their reading level is or what their ability is. And I found that a lot of the kids that maybe it wasn't working out so great first semester, they are more motivated because I've met them at their level, whether that's a, you know, 5th grade reading passage, 3rd grade. And so they're understanding the big ideas. They may not be getting the same depth that I want them to get, but it's a good start and they're willing to do the work.
Do you find, it seems like in a customized environment, teachers work a lot harder. Has that been true in your case? I mean, how is it harder for you as a teacher doing this?
You know, I feel like sometimes you just have to be willing to not have a clear plan all the time. Because, you know, before, like, I knew exactly I'm going to teach this lesson, these are the questions I'm going to ask, and I had it all laid out of exactly how it was going to go. And it's not really like that. I mean, I feel like you almost have to have more planning because you're like, okay, well, this could happen, or this could happen, or they might need these resources. But honestly, it hasn't been as overwhelming as I thought it was going to be. Now, I think the more we progress into it and start hopefully doing more collaboration across grade level, well, not across grade levels, but across subject areas, I think it could definitely get to where it's a little more time consuming. But I think the benefits are worth that.
Well, tell me about the benefits. I mean, why is it worth the extra effort?
Well, just today, like I was gone yesterday, and so I gave the kids an assignment with the Constitution, and it had to do with nouns and adjectives, and we were working on making connections between the two in the Constitution. And one of the kids said to me, "I can't believe you had us doing language arts and history." And you could just tell they had absolutely no concept. I was like, "You do language arts all the time here. You know, we write these paragraphs, we're persuasive." And most of the class didn't have a clue. Mm-hmm. And so I think, you know, a lot of times we talk about kids just don't get it or the material doesn't stick. I don't think it sticks because they just see it as this 1 hour class that outside of it, it doesn't really apply to anything. So I think the more that we could bring in experiences that they can connect to in their own life and kind of break down the barriers of subjects, mm-hmm. those connections would make the material more meaningful and a lot more of it would stick.
In what ways have you seen more collaboration between teachers? Has there been more collaboration?
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is probably the first year I have a lot more understanding of what's actually going on in other classes. Like, I'm pretty aware of what they're doing in English and reading. I have an idea of what they're doing in math and science. And so I think teachers are just a lot more open about, hey, this is what we're doing in English right now. You know, is there any way that you can tie into this? Mr. Alexander and Mrs. Fuchs and I, we've worked together on one project, and we're really hoping to work together on westward expansion coming up and include everyone in that. So I think people are, if anything, their mindsets are just a lot more open, that it doesn't just have to be your one class getting through it, that we can all contribute. And I think the kids are kind of starting to see that a little bit.
Okay.
So,
from your perspective, are there things that we should have asked you about that we didn't hear? I mean, what is it about customized learning that you wanted to tell the world? What would it be?
You know, I think we kind of touched upon it. Customized learning, as I talk to people about it, and they think it's this kind of scary, like out of this world concept. I mean, I think I would just reiterate what I've told a lot of staff here in the district that's not at the junior highs. It's not different from a lot of things that you already know. It's just building upon that. And it's just being able to change that mindset. And I think the other thing is a lot of teachers have seen how we've struggled this year, because it has been a struggle. And that kind of scares people away even more. But I think anytime that you try to change mindset and you try and change structure, you're gonna struggle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay that the kids see the struggle. I think it's okay that the students struggle. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're all gonna make it through it, mm-hmm. one way or the other. And I think kids, if you ask them, you know, they would have found it a pretty rewarding experience. Okay. Just when they reflect back on it.
Anything I've missed that either of you would?
I was just going to ask, and I'll let you tell Lenny, so maybe look in the same way. Do you think there's awareness among parents in Bennett County? What's happening?
Yeah, actually, I think our junior high parents are, you know, I don't know if they understand the whole realm of it, but we've had a couple parent meetings, and we had really good response, because why we didn't come up and ask them, you know, what do you think about mass customized learning? You know, we asked them, what do you want for your student? You know, do you want them to be able to have choice? Do you want them to take more responsibility for their learning? Do you want them to have these 21st century skills? And of course, most parents are going to say yes, because they know that it's essential, you know, to their students' futures. So when we put it that way, we had very good turnout in our surveys from parents in their response to customized learning. I don't know how many parents could tell you if you asked them what's mass customized learning. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they could tell you. But a lot of the components of it, they're pretty well aware of, I feel like.
So as a school, you've really targeted on communicating the components as opposed to the term customer.
Yeah, and just I think we really focused a lot on the philosophy of it. You know, I think we did touch on a little bit on the weight-bearing walls as far as, you know, do you think your students should be in the same grade level or with students who, you know, are with the same needs? And I think we got pretty good reception with that. It'll be interesting to see their perceptions as we try and take down some of the walls, what that'll be, but we're off to a good start.